Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my January wrap-up part 2. Much as I expected, I really left off the throttle in the second half of the month. I only ended up reading 4 books. I did do some rereads, so some comfort reading, but these are going to be all of the new books that I read in the second half of the month. First of all, I listened to Simon Sort of Says by Erin Bow. I learned about this book from a video that Kara did about middle grade books that should have been in the Goodreads Choice Awards if that category hadn't been cut this year. This is a part of a collaboration that a number of YouTubers have taken part in, where they each take a category of the Goodreads Choice Awards and read a swath of the books that were nominated for their category and then say who they think should have won. This prompted by the Goodreads Choice Awards being a hot mess and the winners pretty much always being white and cishet. So Simon Sort of Says is a middle grade about a kid. It doesn't say right away in the text of the book, but it says in the description of the book that the reason that our main character and his family, his 2 parents, have come to this small town where there is no internet reception or radio or TV or anything is so that they can get away from the news stations and everyone knowing that the kid was the only survivor of a school shooting. So this is a pretty heavy book. The reason that this town is like this is that there is a satellite setup that listens for signals of any kind, and they are listening for specifically signals from space. So they need to not have anything in the vicinity that is sending out signals that would obscure or could be mistaken for alien signals. So a large part of the plot is our main character meeting an autistic girl who wants the scientists to be encouraged, because they haven't heard anything from aliens, by sending a fake signal that they will think, that the scientists will think is real, and it will encourage them to keep listening for aliens. So she recruits our main character into helping her with this. I really liked this autistic character. I really appreciated her self-awareness and also her awareness of other people's mental health and knowing a lot of words for mental health and for experiences that are happening, and being careful of when her friend might be triggered, because she knows that something upsetting sent him away from his hometown, but she doesn't know what. I think that because kids are being targeted in school shootings, that it is important to have books that explain that situation to kids and have characters who have gone through that, especially ones that I think handle it this well. Shows a lot of coping mechanisms, both healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms, and it calls out when those coping mechanisms have been unhealthy. It calls out blowing up on people because you're triggered. It talks about how that is hard to avoid, but it's still your responsibility. It also talks about how a horrible thing happening to a kid traumatizes the child and also traumatizes the parents, and talks about the balance between the parents taking care of their own mental health and making sure that the focus is on the person that the bad thing actually happened to. Really excellently handled, in my opinion. So I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I got to work on my goal of reading more books with fat representation. I read Sweetest in the Gale and 40 Love by Olivia Dade, who writes lots of plus size rep in her romance books. She's most famous for her series about Gods of the Gates, where celebrities are falling in love either with each other or with other people, such as, spoiler alert, and I have enjoyed everything I've read by her. So Sweetest in the Gale is a set of 3 100 and so page stories that take place all in a small town Two of them are about two teachers falling in love, and then there is one about people who've been friends for a long time since college having a marriage of convenience so that she can get his health insurance. Trigger warning for that last one for mentions of death by breast cancer and the possibility of the main character having breast cancer, diagnosis, all of that. And I really liked all three of them. They are very cute. They are all featuring older characters than what you usually see in romances. A lot of romances are people between 20s to upper 30s. These were all 40s and up to 50s. So that was cool to see as well. All of the characters were very competent in their careers, and it's fun to see that. One character was also an art teacher. I really love my art teacher from school. All the teachers involved were good teachers, and it talked about how they cared about their students and the things that they did to help their students succeed, and that they were not callous towards their students, which sometimes can happen. So I really enjoyed all of that, as well as the actual romances, and gave Sweetest in the Gale 4.5 stars. 40 Love is featuring a character that you go on to see in Sweetest in the Gale, named Tess or Tessa, and then her romantic lead is 14 years younger. It is the day before her 40th birthday when this starts, and he is 26. And I usually don't like that large of an age gap. 10 years is usually my maximum when the younger person is in their 20s. Like if it's a 60-year-old and an 80-year-old, then a 20-year age gap is like, oh, kind of okay with me. But you know, the younger you get, I pretty much follow the socially acceptable. Right now I can't remember how it's calculated, but it's something plus 7 years. And that usually winds up to be about, with a 25-year-old, a 35-year-old. So this was a bit much for me. But I think especially because the younger character had experienced so much of his career, because it basically started when he was a teenager, because he was a tennis pro, and he had been a professional for a very long time, and how that affected him in his maturity, that made it feel less like he was a little baby compared to her. I liked that both characters had chronic pain. I enjoyed the way they talked to each other, and I really enjoyed the way they looked out for each other and took care of each other. I also thought it made a lot of sense the way that Tess was wary of another relationship because she had been cheated on in her previous relationship, and how our hero was working through a lot of self-esteem issues because he had put so much of his identity into tennis and then was no longer a tennis pro. So I ended up really enjoying it and ended up giving it 4 stars. Then there was a week-long global strike for Palestine, during which a lot of people were striking as much as possible. A lot of people couldn't do school or work, but were able to strike from superfluous purchases, from making social media posts not related to Palestine, things like that. So I put off one of my videos on here and moved my focus back to reading Palestinian works for that week, during which I only finished one, but I got to work on several others. But the one that I read was A Day in the Life of Abed Salama by Nathan Thrall. This is a nonfiction work by a Jewish American reporter who is based in Jerusalem, who is anti-Zionist. And he has a friend called Abed Salama, and I don't remember what year it was, but it was recently. There was a bus crash with a bunch of children on the bus in, I think, East Jerusalem. The emergency response was not good. It took about 30 minutes for most emergency people to arrive, and several of the first people were Palestinian emergency services, even though the closest people were Israeli emergency services. So there were a lot of questions about how this happened, why emergency services didn't get there faster when some emergency services were only a few minutes away. And those questions aren't really answered here definitively. It's just the theory that someone who was in charge of dispatching, maybe a group of someone's, didn't particularly care about when emergency services got there because they knew it was a bus full of Palestinian children. So this one is also pretty dark. Trigger warnings for child death, people being burned because the bus caught fire. So the day in question of Abed Salama's life is as he hears that the bus his child was on got in a wreck, how he tries to find his child, because the children were shipped off to lots of different hospitals because of different types of ID cards. Some of them were able to go through certain checkpoints and some weren't, and some Israeli hospitals might take in some children but some won't, so you need to get them to the nearest Palestinian hospital. And then he himself, having, I believe, a green ID card, which is less status than a blue ID card, there were only certain checkpoints he could go through to look for his child. So that's like the main idea of it, but it reaches out very broadly from that. It talks about perspectives of various people who came to the crash, emergency responders, people who weren't emergency responders but who were on the scene and just started helping, and it talks about various other families who also had children on the bus. At some points, like the history of different ID cards and different parts of apartheid that was going on, felt like they definitely related to the day in the life, but there were also some parts that were very much family drama and like who's marrying who type stuff that felt very unrelated. Even though it was in Abed's family, it felt like that really didn't have anything to do with this day. It didn't really have much to do with how he coped with this day or anything like that. So it felt like, even though, yeah, it painted a good picture of what life was like, it didn't stay true to its vision of being all about this day. And sometimes it was an audiobook, so it was a little bit extra hard to keep track of, okay, who is this person and are they related to Abed, or are they related to some other part of a family that has something to do with the crash, and how are they related? So that was a little difficult. So I think this one is a little bit better to read in print form, as you can go back and check who's being talked about at what time. It really does a good job of exploring the day-to-day life of Palestinians and how it is to live under apartheid in certain ways. So I really appreciated it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So those are all the books that I read, new books that I read in the second half of the month. I do like to edit and subtitle a short video though, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know how your January has gone and any books you particularly enjoyed or disliked during this month. Let me know about in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!